everyone seems that everyone is here. I'm not sure if there is anyone else who would come to this meeting later, because I post the message of this community meeting to the dev channel, so someone might miss the message. Yeah. Okay. So I think we have many people here. So let's start with today's community meeting. Okay, I will share my screen. Yeah. Is it okay to see my screen now?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So today we will also introduce some features of KubeVela, which we are targeting at the version 1.5. Some of the but the features we release now are mainly minor features, not major features. Some of the major features we will discuss later, but we will not show it in today's meeting. You can you can see it in. I think we will release that in the next meeting, like two weeks later. Yeah. So today's agenda includes mainly three minor features. First is about some enhancement for the workflow part. We add some features like the timeout and the conditional execution for the workflow steps, which were contributed by Fogdong, who is also here today, and she will, and she will introduce the details of the technique later. The second part is about policy, which named shared resource, and you can see the related issue here. Generally, before this PR, like in version 1.4 or version 1.3, like two components, if two applications are controlling the same, try to control the same resource, they will have some conflict error, so that the later application would not be able to execute normally. But with the shared resource policy, you can configure that two applications can share the resource at the same time, so that although the second application or the later applications cannot modify the resource created by the first application, but they can share it and use the configuration inside it. So this is the shared resource policy. And last, we have another feature. It's called Cloud Web Shell, and this feature is used in the Vela UX, and we will show that this is like a live execution of the of your terminal on the website, so that through Vela UX, you can like to type command like whether cluster list or kubectl get ports inside the terminal on the browser without using your terminal in your own computer. Yeah. So generally, these are the three minor features we would like to introduce today. And let's start with the first one. Folk, are you okay with that?
Sure.
Okay. So I will stop my sharing. Yeah, and give you the.
I don't have the permission to share my screen.
Okay, so later I will give you the host. Okay, so let's first go to the second part, the shared resource part. So you can see the details of this feature.
You're not sharing your screen.
Sorry. Yeah, okay. I think now I am sharing the screen. Can you see me?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So this feature is introduced in 1.5. So if you would like to try that, you can install the latest version of 1.5.0 alpha 0.2, I think. So let's see some examples for how this feature could work. So let's see that if we have two applications, and let's say the first application is going to dispatch a namespace called example, and another component is going to make a config map inside that namespace. So the first application generally is try to create a new namespace and place a new config map inside it. It's a common operation if you want to bootstrap some new namespace and you want to do something later inside it. So, but sometimes you might have two different applications to make some bootstrap configurations. For example, the second application will also try to create the example namespace, but it will try to create another config map. So let's say both applications are trying to create the same namespace, but they will create the different config map. So without the policy here, if you deploy the application 1 first, and it will create the namespace example. But when the second application try to create the example namespace, it will find that the namespace is controlled by the application 1, so that it cannot try to override the control of the namespace, so that it will fail, and it cannot create the namespace again. But let's say if we marked this namespace resource as shared resource, then if two applications both set the resource to be shared, then the namespace created by the application 1 will have a special annotation inside, which will identify that although this namespace is created by application 1, it can be shared by other applications. So when the second application try to create that namespace, it will find that the namespace is shareable by the application 1, and then it will add itself to the sharer list, which means that it can now use the namespace created by application 1, although it cannot modify it. But if application 1 goes, let's say it deletes itself, let's say we delete the application 1. Although the namespace example is created by application 1, since it is now shared by two applications, so it will not delete the namespace example, but instead it will give the control to the second application, which means that when the application 1 is deleted, the application 2 now is the owner of the namespace, which means it can either modify the namespace or delete the namespace as well. So this is a basic mechanism of the shared resource. And here are some detailed examples for how it would work. For example, let's say 3 applications are share the same resource, and the owner will be marked as the first application, and other applications will be listed as the sharer. And then after A is deleted, the second application will become the owner now, and the sharer will remain 2 applications. Then if another application tries to also share this resource, it will add itself to the sharer list. And in the end, if all of the applications are deleted, or the application is now using another version which do not need that resource anymore. For example, application C has the config map for version 1, but application C uses another config map for version 2. Then the config map will also be deleted as well. So this is a common case for the sharing resource. But if you do not set up the shared resource policy, it will be forbidden to do so. So that let's say if application 1 tries to own the application 1 creates the config map, but it does not set it to be shareable, then although application B tries to share the config map, it will be prevented since that resource is not marked as shareable. Also, if you have some like application 1 is making it as a shareable resource, but application 2 tries to own it, it will be forbidden as well. So these are some bad cases where you cannot do the sharing resource. But if you have some resource, all the applications are making it shareable, it will be okay to do that. So generally, this is one of the small feature in the latest 1.5. And this is the introduction for the second minor feature. And is there any question for this feature?
I have a question.
Okay, Daniel.
So if in that case with the shared resources, so I have seen that you are basically calling resource types, right? So if you are going to do the same for the config map, you will say config map, and that will say every config map, basically, not a particular one.
I make the selector here, and it shows that it uses resource type here. But I need to notify that this is only one of the usage for the selector.
Yeah.
You can set up other selectors, and we support select resources by resource names or their component names or even component types. So you do not need to specify the resource type to select all the namespace. For example, you can say that the selector uses component names and the component name is NS1. Yeah. Then the resource created by the component NS1 will be marked as shareable. Yeah.
Okay. And another related question. If in case both applications try to, let's say, create, for example, a config map, and they have the same name by different data entries, what happened in that point? Like, is there a consolidation or is there an error, or we assume that the first one wins?
Yeah, the first one wins. So the basic idea is that let's see the figure here. Only the owner can write to the resource. The sharer cannot write. So the first one who comes first, it will be okay to write the config map with the data it wants. But the second one will not be able to make modification to the data entry unless the first application is deleted or it's relays the control to the second application. For example, it's do not use the resource anymore. Then the second application will be okay to modify the config maps data entry. For example, use the state keep.
Okay, I guess that in that situation, when application 1 is deleted, the reconcile method for application 2 will effectively override the config map.
Yeah.
Okay, that's okay.
Is there any further? Okay. Any further questions for this feature? Okay.
Yeah, good question.
Okay.
So in the previous diagrams, if you can go back to the diagram.
You mean this one?
App A is deleted on the top right. App A is deleted, still the annotation exists, right, on the shader? Or the annotation is removed?
Sorry, I didn't catch up. So you say when application A is deleted, what do you want to ask?
The annotation on the shader is removed, correct? When the application is deleted or no?
You mean the annotation of the config map?
Sorry, I got it. Yeah, annotation is removed. I was just confirming the annotation is still there or not.
Yeah, the annotation of the config map will be modified, not completely removed. For example, when application delete itself, it will set the second sharer as the owner.
Got it. Sounds good.
Okay, let's go to the next feature. So let's say the Cloud Web Shell. I'm not sure if any one of you have been trying the Value UX. Because I know that some of the users here mainly use the controller part, but we also have the fancy UI for the KubeVela application, so you can try it. And we have some features for the Vela UX now. So this feature is like we can execute commands on the web shell. For example, let's say now we are in the UI here, and we can start with the there is a terminal icon here, and if you click on the icon, it will try to create a shell inside. With this shell, you can type command inside the web browser, and you can get anything you want with the web shell. So this is a very simple feature, but it can be very useful. And we can know it is noticeable that since we add the privilege or the authentication in version 1.4 for KubeVela, the Vela UX also have some privilege control. So currently we have bind the privilege of the, since we are now using the administrator to execute commands inside the web shell. But if you log in as another user, you will not be able to execute any command you want, because some of the command you will be forbidden to do that. And the underlying mechanism also ensures that when you execute commands inside the web shell, it will use the privilege of yourself, which is identified by your underlying Kubernetes identity. So although this web shell can provide some execution interface for your Kubernetes cluster, but it will also be secured by the Kubernetes RBAC mechanism. Yeah. So this is a quite simple feature to introduce, but it is very powerful. Any related questions for that? Okay, so let's now go back to the first feature. Okay, I will try to.
I think there's an arrow beside the share screen, and you can grant me permissions through that.
Yeah, I have seen your
Oh, okay. I can share my
Is
screen.
it okay now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you see the screen?
Yeah, I can see.
Okay. So today I'm gonna give you a little introduction about our enhanced workflow. So we have clear our documentation here, and you can see the whole workflow capability in the declarative workflow. So here's some overview of our workflow. I'll skip this part since I guess you are already familiar with the workflow. So in the past versions, all the steps in workflows will be executed sequentially. And if a step is the type step group, it can contain a series of substeps, and the substeps are executed together. But in our future version, KubeVela 1.5, you can now specify the execution mode of steps and substeps. And there's some form of the state comparison with application and workflow. And I'm gonna give you a little introduction about our core features. So first is suspend and resume the workflow. Since I guess you are already familiar with the suspend part and the resume part, so I'm gonna give you a new feature here that we can now we can resume the workflow, the suspend workflow manually, and we can resume the workflow automatically. So if you want the workflow to be continued automatically after a period of time, you can now add a duration parameter to the suspend step. Like below, you can see that the second step is suspend, and you can add the duration field in the properties. Sorry. So here's the YAML file of this auto resume application. There's 3 steps. The first is apply the component 1, and then it's a suspend. And the third is apply component 2. So we can apply this application. And you can see the right side of my terminal. The first, the component 1 is deployed, and then the workflow is now in suspending state. But after a while, it will resume automatically, since we have specified the 5 seconds in our suspend step. And now the second component is also deployed. You can check the status of the application. You can see that all the steps are succeeded. So that's our first core features, suspend and resume. And the second is sub-steps. You can have this special step type step group in KubeVela workflow, where you can declare sub-steps. The YAML file is more like this. So the steps will run in sequential, and the sub-steps will run in parallel. I'll skip the demo part since I gave this demo before. And the dependency part, so it's just you can use this depends on to specify the dependency of the steps. And also you can give some inputs and outputs in the workflow step. These are the former features of workflow. And here comes the new part. We can now specify the if conditions to the workflow step. So if there's no if condition specified, if the former steps in workflow is failed, then the later steps will be skipped. But if you want to want a step to be executed anyway, you can specify if to always for this step. And I want to show this part that we can also customize our if conditions. We have these 2 built-in variables. The first one is status. Status will contain the state information for all workflow steps. So you can use this status.stepname.phase equals succeeded, or whatever the workflow steps phase like failed or timeout, to determine whether this step should be executed or not. Also, you can use the inputs variable, in which it contains all the inputs parameter of the step. So I'm gonna give you another demo here. So first, let's check out the YAML file. There is, I guess, 3 or 4 steps here. The first step will apply a component, and this step will give outputs called component-output. And the second step is a notification. It gets the inputs of the former steps outputs. And this step also have a if condition here. Its value is inputs component-output equals custom if. So if you can take a look at the first step, in its output, the value is context.name, which means the value is the name of the application, which is custom-if. So you can say that the second condition here will be met. So the second step will be executed. For the third step here, in its if is status dot notification dot failed. It means that if the notification step here is failed, then this step will be executed. So you can say so as we can know, the second step should be succeeded, so this step will be skipped. And for the last step here, its condition is status dot notification dot succeeded. So if the second step notification here is succeeded, then the last step will be executed. We can apply this file here. I'm going to delete the last one to make it clear. So the first is we're gonna apply a component here. Okay, now the application is running and we can check out the status. So as you can see, the first step is succeeded. The second one is also succeeded, but the third one is skipped because its condition is not met. And the last one is also succeeded. We can also check out the Slack here. I sent some notification here. So as you can see, the first one send its value in inputs, which is the name of the application. It calls custom-if. And the second message here is the notification is succeeded. So that you can use these custom if conditions to control the workflow. And the last one I want to share here is you can now specify the timeout of the step. For example, we have this YAML file here and we get 3 steps here. The first is we can apply component 1 and then we want to suspend the application. But at the meanwhile, we specify this timeout in 5 seconds, which means if you don't resume this application in 5 seconds, then the second step will be failed and the third step will also be skipped. We can apply this YAML file here. So as you can see, now we apply this first component. And then in the suspend step, the workflow is now suspending. And then the workflow is terminated. We can check out the status. So you can see that the first step is apply component 1 and it is succeeded. But the second is failed because of the step is timeout. And so the third step here, apply component 2 is skipped because the former step is failed. Yeah, so that's all of my demo today. So any questions? Okay.
Hi, so may I ask a question?
Sure.
So it's kind of a wider question. That the demos you've just done are impressive and look good. But my wider question though is, I see the value of KubeVela for myself in take an OAM definition, roll it out onto the cluster with KubeVela to create deployments, etc., and the different traits. I kind of like the fact you've added this stuff, but like for me, it's never going to replace Azure DevOps, which is what we use, unfortunately, or GitHub Actions or Jenkins. And so I wonder about the sort of strategy of trying to turn this into a build engine as well as unrolling OAM items into clusters. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts on that.
I think that's a big question. So So I think the value of the OAM is that you can use of course you can use like tools like GitHub Actions or whatever. If you want to do continuous delivery, I think in this unified application that in OAM you can manage application across multi environments, and also you can use this IAC-based workflow to specify your steps of delivery. But I think the point of this question is that I have the case that you use GitHub Action or Jenkins in your practice, so that we can compare the advantages and the disadvantages of KubeVela and some other tools. So I guess it's more like a general questions. And if you can, I think that we can start a discussion on the GitHub. It will be better.
On the GitHub or on Slack?
Both are okay.
Yeah, I think it's just a wider question because this will probably never replace all of, you know, Argo CD, Flux, Crossplane, Azure DevOps. It can't do everything. It looks great what you've done, but it can't do everything. And so therefore, is it better maybe to focus on extra things in the OAM to deployable space than trying to replace those things, is my question.
Yeah, and if you have already adopted some other tools, there's some other burden that you want to adopt some new tools like OAM or KubeVela. So that's another price, I think.
Yeah, actually, I think there is not a very clear answer to that question. Actually, our KubeVela team and OAM team are also continuously asking ourselves what's the difference for different CD or CI techniques and how we could provide extra values upon existing tools like Argo CD or GitHub Actions and Jenkins. So we have also tried to integrate KubeVela with existing tools like last year we tried to make some integration with the Jenkins. Let's say use Jenkins to make some image build and then connect it to the KubeVela's application deploy. So it's just like, as you said, we were focusing on the deploy progress of the application itself and let the CI tools to do the other parts. But when we see that when some users try to use KubeVela or OAM as their PaaS platform, and they are relying more and more heavily on KubeVela itself. So they try to find a more native way to connect the KubeVela application itself to the deploy progress. For example, have fine control to the deploy progress. So we have some suspend and restarts and many advanced operations here today. But I think for most users, especially for the new users, they might not directly will use those advanced features, but they will like to use the most simple ones, like to just deploy the application resource. But later they can connect it to other CD or CI projects. For example, connect it with the GitHub Action. It is absolutely okay to do that. But if they try to use the IAC part to use the KubeVela workflow to do the CI things, I think it would not be a good idea to say, oh, KubeVela cannot do that. You must need to install the Jenkins or GitHub Action to do these things. I think it's not the best practice for users if they want to try to use KubeVela to do that. So in my opinion, I think there are alternative ways to do those things, although they can overlap with each other to some extent. But as you said, if you already have some Jenkins or GitHub Actions, and a lot of teams in your company has already been using that techniques, I think the focus point for the KubeVela will be how to connect the KubeVela system with the existing CI tools. But if you want to start with something brand new and let's say everything on Kubernetes, you can try to use KubeVela to solve those things. And actually, in version 1.5, we are also making a large progress on the workflow part. Is that we are not we will not always bind the workflow part with KubeVela application closely. We will try to make a separate workflow run, which can be run outside the application part, which means that we can have better control, better process control outside the application itself. And you can use the workflow run to orchestrate applications, not only single application. So I think we are also making more explorations for how to make better experience for users, but the answer is not determined. So we are very open to new ideas and your suggestions or ideas for that.
Thank you
It's
very
okay
much for the
to discuss it
comprehensive
on
answers.
GitHub.
Yeah, there isn't an easy answer, of course there isn't, but it's interesting to hear your answers. Thank you.
Thank you as well.
I think I want to add some details from Inda. The workflow of KubeVela is quite different from that about Argo CD or Flux CD. The main difference is KubeVela can glue all of them, and you can have one of them as the implementation layer. So KubeVela provides a choice for you to choose Flux CD or Argo CD as a CD implementation, and it can also glue other implementations. Beyond that, you will have an interface which represents as a component definition or trait definition or workflow definition. The interface is very important, as we can make it as a standard part. And this is also one of the main purpose of OAM. And actually, we can't avoid workflow in the deploy world. Every software needs a deploy process, and we can't have a declarative model for all the software. Especially, we hope to have enough extensibility. So we give the users the choice to define a workflow by themselves. Then they can either to choose use the simple part, which only have components and traits, and then they can also define a complex application that has a user-defined workflow. I think the main goal is to make the software delivery and the management to be simple and have a API, and that's the main goal. We are not trying to replace the implement or trying to replace Argo CD or Flux CD. Actually, we are adopting them as implementation parts. You can see the GitOps docs. We have used Flux CD, and we will add in Argo CD as another choice. It has already been the add-on of KubeVela. So using KubeVela, you will have enough choices to choose.
Yeah, I think those are good answers. And the fact that you separate the workflow and the application is important, because then the implementation of one does not drive the other. That's important, because otherwise you end up in contortions that shouldn't be there. But I guess the only negative in developing the workflow as well as the application side is that resource is taken where in the workflow side where it could be used in the application side, but I don't say that's a strong argument. And again, thank you for the answers.
Thanks for your input. I think this is a really good question.
Yeah, so we are trying to use it. I think there's a workflow, defining the workflow within the application. The advantage I can see is that you can orchestrate the provisioning of, for example, cloud resources that are associated with your application, instead of defining that in GitOps as different steps. So I see some value in doing that, but you still need GitOps to kind of orchestrate the overall deployment of your system.
Yes, hope we can discover more user scenarios.
Right. I think it's a very interesting discussion, and we are very open for further discussions for that on both Slack and GitHub. And any more questions? Yeah. And also, since we have done the agenda today, and I would like to further introduce something we would like to discuss in the next community meeting. Maybe we will discuss something about the observability part. Recently, we are trying to integrate the KubeVela system with the observability tools like Grafana or Prometheus, which enables you to have some better observations to your system, including your application as well. And we might we will discuss some implementation or the demo in the next community meeting, I think. And also the workflow run, as we just discussed, we are separating it out of the application itself, but the workflow inside the application will be maintained as well. So basically we will make some progress in this direction for the next 2 weeks. So I think you can expect something very interesting in next community discussion. Yeah. Can we ask a question about this thread on deleting? Yeah, it's okay. And actually, I have seen your questions. It's okay to discuss with it, and I think today, yeah, you can just raise it up.
Okay, thank you. So I think further add on to what Anup had mentioned, the last thread I see is sharing logs, which I don't think we see the logs. So just looking forward to hear from you guys.
Okay, so you mean you have go to the Terraform configuration and check the logins for the configuration? Have you checked the Terraform controller?
So we run a Vela command to capture the log. So Vela log, and then provided the application name which KubeVela created, and then we try to capture the log from there. And we try to delete KubeVela application. It didn't show any logs. We try to see like, are there any previous logs available? None of the logs are available, which we could see. So we didn't check any controller or any other logs, but just the application logs.
Okay, so I think I think the question is here. First, when you try to delete KubeVela application, the application is blocked, and I see that you have checked the status of the application, and it shows that it is continuously deleting the Terraform configuration object, and the object is not removed. So then we go to the Terraform configuration and see that I think the Terraform configuration should have the delete timestamp already there. So it's being deleted, but it is not correctly deleted. So if the Terraform configuration itself does not have any detailed information for that, I guess you might need to check the Terraform controller, which might have more details. And also, I think the delete progress of the Terraform configuration also will create a pod. I'm not very familiar with the Terraform controller, but I think if it creates a deletion job for the Terraform configuration, you can check the logs inside and see what happens. So I think there are two probable conditions you can check. First is that your cloud resource is not deleted. So at this time, so the Terraform controller should be making API requests to let the Terraform to delete the resource, but something bad happens so that it cannot remove the cloud resource. For example, I know that some cloud providers may have some protection strategies. I'm not sure if is there anything related to that, but Terraform configuration itself might not be enough to get all those informations. So if there is some blocking in this condition, you might need to go to other logs, for example, the Terraform controller or the deletion job. And for the second condition, it's much more easier, is that the underlying cloud resource has already been deleted, but the Terraform configuration is not removed. So if this happens, then something bad will happen to the Terraform controller. Maybe there are some error or bugs inside, so that even the cloud resource is removed, the Terraform configuration cannot be removed. So at this time, you can manually remove the deletion timestamp of the manually remove the finalizer of the Terraform configuration. Then everything should be okay. But I think if it falls into this condition, then there should be something wrong with the Terraform controller, and we will have some issues to record this situation, and we will have team members to look into it. I'm not sure if I'm getting everything okay.
Yeah, I think we can try to look into it. Maybe Zillion or which one, if you.
Yeah. Can you provide that application details? I can take a look and I will provide in the same thread what's happening. Is this in MDev, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, I just looked at I didn't see any jobs open pending in that namespace. But I can, if you provide the application details, I can get more logs from the controller.
Sure.
Okay, I think if there is any details for the logs or the information for the Kubernetes objects, you can post the details on the Slack thread, and we will look into it. The member for the developer for the Terraform controller is not here today, so I think maybe tomorrow we will together look into it in detail.
Sure.
Sorry, one more from me. I don't wish to take any more of anyone's time, but I also have a post on Slack, Paul Sweeney, underneath the RDS one. Can somebody have a look at that and reply to me?
Okay, I think you can. You just posted it like 1 hour before?
No, yesterday.
Yesterday.
Yeah.
So you mean the environment variable populated from the.
Yeah.
Okay, I think it might. So you are asking the service binding and the web service component. Oh, so you are trying to you are asking the difference for using the components configuration directly or use the trait. Is it
Yes.
right? Yeah. So I know that there are some overlapping between the trait and the web service components, because we are making the web service component very functional so that you can include every configurations inside as well. So I think if your scenario is quite simple and straightforward, it is completely okay to directly write it in the web service component. I think the trait part is like you are splitting this particular capability out of the web service component, so that you can use the service binding even for other components and not web service. For example, if you have other customized component definition and you want to use it, or let's say if you are using the native Kubernetes objects, the components, then you can also use the service binding to edit the existing objects declared by the component definition. But
I see. So the trait is more kind of general use, whereas if you're using a web service, you might as well use the property that's there, right?
Right. And also
Okay,
there are
understood.
Yeah. Also there are other usage for the trait and components. If you are using the multi-cluster deployment. So for the multi-cluster parts, there are another policy named override. So there is an override policy where you can configure the difference between different cluster deployment. For example, you declare a web service component, and then you try to deploy it in 3 clusters, and you want to say, let's say the cluster 1 and cluster 2 use the default configuration, and the cluster 3 will change the let's say change the environment for one of the environment variable. Then at this time you can use the override policy to add a small trait to the cluster 3's deployment. So that so you can better manage your configurations. Yeah. But if
so it's more flexible that way. No, I understand. That's good. Thank you. That's great.
Okay.
That explains it.
Okay, I think today's we have a very detailed discussion to a wide range of questions, and I think it's quite meaningful and helpful for all of us. So if you have any further questions, you can feel free to post it on Slack or the GitHub issues. Although we are not always online and respond to you at the first time, but we will always have chances to look into it. And so it will be okay to do anything you want. Okay, so that's all for today's community meeting. And thank you, everyone. And hope we can have more similar discussions in future.
Thanks, folks. Very informative.
Thank you.
Thank you. Very good.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.